The morning of the Kai Enterprises meeting arrived with a heavy electric tension that seemed to vibrate through the floor of the executive wing. After the late-night drive home, Y/N had barely slept, her mind racing with financial figures and the strange, quiet intensity Jungkook had shown in the car. She arrived at the office early, her hands trembling slightly, as she opened the final file on her computer to perform one last check. Jungkook walked into her cabin at exactly 8:15 a.m., looking sharp and imposing in a charcoal-colored suit. He stood behind her, his presence looming over her shoulder as he watched her scroll through the slides. "Is it ready?" he asked, his voice low and professional. Jungkook scanned the screen for a long, silent minute. A small, almost imperceptible nod of approval followed. "It's good. Very good, he said. Then he turned his sharp gaze toward her. "And you will be the one presenting this to Kai Enterprises." E/N's heart nearly stopped. "Sir, I can't do that," she said nervously, her voice rising in panic. "I'm just your manager. These are top-level executives. I've never presented a deal of this magnitude. I'll ruin it." Jungkook stepped closer, fixing her with an unwavering stare. "You won't ruin it because you know this data better than anyone else in this building. You stayed up all night for this. Trust my judgment. You can do it." At 9 a.m., Jungkook, YN, and the other high-ranking members of the Jeon organization entered the grand conference room. Shortly after, the doors opened and Kai, the CEO of Kai Enterprises, entered with his team. Jungkook greeted them with a calculated, professional warmth, but his eyes remained sharp, observing every movement. As they all took their seats around the massive glass table, the room fell into a heavy silence. As the meeting began, Kai's gaze immediately fell upon Y/N. While the others were focused on their tablets and folders, Kai seemed more interested in the young woman sitting next to Jungkook. "And who is this?" Kai asked, his voice smooth and laced with a playful curiosity that made Jungkook's jaw tighten instantly. "This is my manager, Y/N, Jungkook replied coldly, his hand resting on the table in a possessive, tensed manner. "A very capable manager, I assume," Kai remarked, leaning back and smirking, his eyes never leaving Y/N's face. "It's rare to see someone so young in such a high position here." Jungkook didn't give Kai a chance to continue his flirtatious observation. "My manager will be giving the presentation today," he announced, gesturing for Y/N to take the floor. E/N stood up, her legs feeling like jelly. She took a deep breath, looking at the slides she had spent the previous night agonizing over. Once she began to speak, her nerves seemed to evaporate. She moved through the complex data with a level of confidence and clarity that surprised even herself. E/N gave an incredible presentation, leaving everyone in the room, including Kai's team, visibly impressed with her knowledge and poise. "Impressive," Kai whispered as she finished, nodding slowly. Not just a pretty face, but a brilliant mind as well. The room erupted into a technical discussion, but the foundation Y/N had laid was unshakable. The deal was almost finalized right then and there, with Kai admitting that the clarity of the presentation had cleared his remaining doubts. As the meeting adjourned and the Kai team began to leave, Kai stopped in front of Y/N. "Excellent work, Y/N. I hope to see much more of you during this partnership," he said, reaching out to shake her hand a second longer than necessary. Jungkook stepped between them before the silence could stretch too long. "We have much to discuss regarding the implementation, Kai. Let's keep our focus on the contract," Jungkook said, his voice dripping with an icy authority that left no room for argument. The conference room of Jeon Enterprises was filled with a rare sense of accomplishment. The presentation had been a resounding success, and the atmosphere was buzzing as the final details of the massive deal with Kai Enterprises were being smoothed out. Y/N stood near the head of the table, organizing her notes, her heart finally slowing down after the high-pressure performance. As the meeting officially concluded, the executives began to filter out, leaving only a few key players in the room. Jungkook stood by the window, his back to the room, watching the city skyline with a tense expression that contradicted the victory they had just achieved. Kai, the CEO of Jeon Enterprises, didn't leave with his team. Instead, he lingered, his eyes fixed on Y/N as she moved gracefully across the room. He slowly approached Jungkook, a smirking confidence in his stride. Kai stopped just a few inches from Jungkook, leaning in as if to share a confidential business secret. "Jungkook, I must say, your presentation was very well executed," Kai began, his voice smooth and professional. Jungkook turned slightly, his gaze cold. "The numbers speak for themselves, Kai." Kai chuckled, his voice dropping to a low, sinister whisper that only Jungkook could hear. "Oh, the numbers are fine, but your manager, she is even better than the presentation. She is truly exquisite." Jungkook's jaw tightened, his hands balling into fists at his sides. "Watch your tongue, Kai." Kai's smirk widened into something vile. "I'll tell you what, if I can get the chance to spend one night with your manager, I'll sign this deal right now and finalize everything without another word of negotiation. One night, Jungkook. That's all it takes for this multi-billion-dollar deal to be yours." The air in the room seemed to freeze. For a split second, Jungkook was silent, a deadly stillness settling over him. Then, with a speed that shocked everyone remaining in the room, Jungkook lunged forward and grabbed Kai by his expensive silk collar, slamming him back against the mahogany conference table. "Jungkook, sir." YN gasped, her notes fluttering to the floor as she rushed toward them. Jungkook didn't hear her. His eyes were dark, burning with a lethal mafia-style intensity that Kai had clearly underestimated. "You think you can come into my office and put a price on her?" Jungkook hissed, his voice trembling with a terrifying fury. "You think your pathetic deal means more to me than her dignity? If you ever speak about her like that again, I will make sure you never speak again. I don't need your money, and I certainly don't need a snake like you in my circle." Kai's face had gone pale, his smug confidence replaced by genuine fear as he looked into the eyes of a man who looked ready to kill. Jungkook tightened his grip, pulling Kai's face inches from his own. "Listen to me carefully. If Y/N weren't standing in this room right now, you wouldn't be walking out of here alive. Now take your people and get out of my sight. The deal is dead. I don't want anything from you." He shoved Kai away with such force that the other CEO stumbled. Kai didn't wait for a second invitation. He gathered his belongings and hurried out of the room, his team following in stunned silence. The conference room fell into a heavy, ringing silence. The other members of Jungkook's inner circle, including Taehyung and Jimin, stood frozen, their eyes wide. No one understood why Jungkook had suddenly snapped or why he had thrown away the biggest deal of the year over a whisper. E/N stood trembling, looking at Jungkook's heaving chest and his white-knuckled grip on the edge of the table. She saw the raw, unbridled protection in his eyes, but she had no idea what words had been exchanged to trigger such a violent defense. "Jungkook," she whispered, but he simply turned away, walking out of the conference room toward his private cabin without looking back. The air in the executive wing of Jeon Enterprises was thick with an unsettling silence following the explosive confrontation in the conference room. Jungkook had retreated to his private cabin, his movements sharp and fueled by a lingering dark adrenaline. Behind him, the heavy oak doors clicked shut, but the silence didn't last long. Within minutes, the other members of the inner circle, Taehyung, Jimin, and Hoseok, entered the cabin. They found Jungkook standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to them, his shoulders tensed like a predator ready to strike again. The confusion among the members was palpable. They had just watched their leader walk away from a multi-billion-dollar deal and physically assault a major business partner without a word of public explanation. "Jungkook, you need to talk to us," Taehyung began, his voice unusually grave. "What happened in there? You almost took Kai's head off over a whisper. The board is going to want answers, and right now, we don't have any." Jimin stepped forward, his expression a mix of worry and frustration. "Everyone is asking, what happened? You can't just throw away a deal like that without telling us why. Was the intel wrong? Did he threaten the organization? Jungkook turned slowly, his eyes still dark with a residual, mafia-style rage that made even his closest friends hesitate. He looked at them, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "You want to know what he said?" Jungkook asked, his voice trembling with disgust. That snake offered to finalize the deal and sign the contract on one condition. He wanted a night with Y/N. The confusion that had filled the air was instantly replaced by a sharp, collective intake of breath. Jungkook continued, his words spitting like venom. He sat there and tried to put a price on her dignity. He thought he could use his money and his deal to buy her for a night. I didn't just want to hit him. I wanted to end him.
The members stood in stunned silence as the gravity of the revelation sank in. They finally understood the reason for the violence. While they had always known Jungkook was protective, this was different. He hadn't just protected an employee, he had defended someone he valued more than the most lucrative deal in his company's history.
"We understand now, boss," Hoshok said quietly, his gaze softening. "Nobody blames you for that. No deal is worth that kind of filth." In that moment, the unspoken truth became clear to everyone in the room. They had suspected for a long time that Jungkook's obsession with the CCTV feeds and his harsh treatment of Y/N were masks for a deeper attraction. Seeing him risk everything to defend her honor was the final confirmation they needed. Jungkook was in love with Y/N, even if he was only just beginning to accept it himself. Jimin looked at Jungkook, seeing the raw vulnerability hidden beneath the CEO's stern exterior. He knew he had to be the one to voice the painful reality that Jungkook was trying to ignore. "Jungkook, we all know you like her," Jimin said, his voice gentle but firm. "We know that your anger today came from a place of love and protection, but you have to remember the bitter truth." Jungkook looked away, his jaw tightening again. "She is already committed to Minho," Jimin continued, the words hanging heavy in the air. "She chose him. No matter how much you protect her or how much you feel for her, she belongs to someone else right now." Jungkook closed his eyes, the heartbreak visible for a fleeting second before he masked it behind his usual cold facade. He had saved her from Kai, but he couldn't save his own heart from the fact that she was going home to another man. The atmosphere at Jeon Enterprises had shifted from the dark tension of the Kai meeting to a state of absolute euphoria. While Jungkook had been internally struggling with the bitter truth that Y/N was committed to Minho, the professional world was about to bow down to his success. 4 days after the fallout with Kai, the official announcement arrived that changed everything. Jeon Enterprises was awarded the world's #1 company business award. It was a monumental achievement that placed Jungkook at the very pinnacle of the global economy. The office buzzed with excitement as the news broke. Employees were congratulating one another, and the members, Taehyung, Jimin, Jin, Namjoon, Yoongi, and Hoseok, were beaming with pride. They had reached the summit they had been climbing for years. Inside the CEO's cabin, the mood was different. A small, polite smile appeared on Jungkook's face, but he was not truly happy. Despite holding the title of the world's most successful leader, his heart felt heavy. His mind was entirely occupied with thoughts of Y/N, and no trophy or title could distract him from the ache of her being with someone else. Yoongi entered the cabin and stood silently for a moment, observing his younger brother. He saw the way Jungkook stared blankly at the award notification, his eyes devoid of the spark of victory. "What's wrong, Jungkook? Aren't you happy?" Yoongi asked, his voice soft but probing. Jungkook looked up, forcing a bit more energy into his voice. "I am very happy, Yoongi. Our company has been named the best in the entire world. It's a huge achievement for all of us." Yoongi didn't look convinced, but he didn't push further. He knew the source of Jungkook's sadness was just a few desks away in the manager's cabin. Soon the rest of the brothers joined them in the cabin, their energy filling the room. "This calls for a celebration, Jungkook. We have to throw a party," Namjoon suggested enthusiastically. Jungkook's first instinct was to reject the idea. "I don't think a party is necessary. We have work to do, and I'm not in the mood for a crowd," he replied firmly. However, the members wouldn't take no for an answer. They pointed out that the employees had worked incredibly hard for this milestone and deserved a moment of joy. Seeing the genuine happiness and excitement of his brothers, Jungkook finally gave in and said yes to the celebration. The brothers began discussing the logistics immediately. They wanted something grand but controlled. "Let's make it a pool party," they decided. It was settled that the party would include the company employees to celebrate the collective win, but there would be strict rules. No press and no cameras allowed. It was to be a private, safe environment where they could all relax away from the prying eyes of the media. Jimin and Taehyung shared a glance. While the party was for the company, their personal mission was to ensure that this event would finally bring Jungkook and YN into the same space outside of the rigid office walls. Jungkook sat back, his mind already racing. He was terrified of seeing YN in a social setting, but he was also desperately craving a moment where he didn't have to be just her boss. The atmosphere in the CEO's suite at Jeon Enterprises was a strange blend of corporate triumph and chaotic brotherhood. Winning the world's #1 company award was a milestone that would go down in history, but for the 6 men surrounding Jungkook, the real mission was much closer to the heart. Jungkook sat at his desk, staring blankly at a screen that displayed world-class market analytics, though his mind was miles away, anchored to a single image of Y/N. The members had already decided on the grand pool party for the employees, but one critical detail remained: the invitation of the manager who had made the Kai presentation possible. Jin, leaning against the doorframe with a mischievous glint in his eyes, finally spoke up. "So, the list is almost done. But Jungkook, you need to personally invite YN," he stated matter-of-factly. Jungkook didn't even look up, his jaw tightening. "No, I'm not doing it," he muttered, his voice dropping into a defensive tone. "The HR department sends out the mass emails for company events. My personal involvement is unnecessary." The cabin was suddenly filled with the sound of collective laughter. The members knew exactly why Jungkook was being so stubborn. He was terrified of his own feelings. "Taehyung." "Oh, look at our mafia boss," Taehyung teased, circling Jungkook's chair. "You can face down a room full of armed rivals without blinking. But the thought of asking a girl to a pool party makes you hide behind HR. Hoseok, attention everyone," Hoseok announced to the empty corners of the room. "The world's most powerful CEO is officially a coward in love. Yoongi." He's probably worried that if he talks to her, he'll accidentally say, "Please love me," instead of, "Please come to the party," Yoongi added with a smirk. Jungkook's face flushed a deep shade of crimson. "Everyone, stop talking nonsense," he barked, though the members could see the suppressed smile and the sheer embarrassment he was feeling. Jimin had been quiet, observing the scene with a playful smirk. He knew that if they waited for Jungkook to act on his own, the party would be over before the invitation was sent. "You have to do it, Jungkook," Jimin said, stepping toward the desk. "As the CEO, it's only right you personally invite the manager who handled the deal that got us this award." "I said no," Jungkook repeated, his eyes fixed on his laptop. Without a word of warning, Jimin reached out and pressed the button on the office intercom. The line crackled to life, connecting directly to Y/N's desk. "Y/N, this is Jimin. Jungkook is calling you to his cabin right now." Jimin spoke into the receiver before Jungkook could react. Jungkook's eyes went wide. He lunged for the intercom, but it was too late. The message was delivered. The members scurried to the corners of the room, trying to hide their laughter as footsteps approached the door. A moment later, Y/N entered the cabin, looking slightly confused but professional as ever. The members immediately straightened up, though their faces were still twitching with amusement. Jungkook cleared his throat, avoiding her gaze and adopting the coldest, most formal tone he could muster. "Manager Y/N, there is a pool party this Saturday to celebrate the world's #1 award. As you were involved in the presentation, your attendance is expected. Be ready on Saturday," he said, his voice clipped and stiff. E/N blinked, surprised by the directness. "Oh." Thank you, sir. I'll be there. As she turned to leave, the members didn't let him off easy. Taehyung mouthed, so romantic behind YN's back, causing Jungkook to glare at him with murderous intent. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Minho picked up Y/N from the office. As they were driving, Minho turned to her with a smile. Hey, I got an invitation for a pool party on Saturday from your office, Minho said cheerfully. Did you get one too? Y/N? Yes, Jungkook sir invited me personally today, YN replied. We should go together. Jungkook, who was watching them from his high-rise window as they left, felt a familiar heavy sinking feeling in his chest. He had forced the invitation, but the thought of seeing her arrive at his party on Minho's arm was a reality he wasn't prepared to face.